Welcome to Beyond Business Barriers, powered by insights, driven by strategy, and yes, assisted by AI. I'm your host, Roy MacEwen, and today's episode is part of a special series where we sit down with industry leaders to dig into what's working, what's not, and what the future holds. I'm excited to have Belle joining me today. Belle, glad to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's kick things off with a quick intro. Can you tell us a little about who you are and where our listeners can find you online?
Absolutely. I'm Belle Walker. I'm the CEO and founder of Belleview Consulting, and I take organizations from friction to function. You can find out a lot more at belleviewconsulting.com. That's BELLEVIEW because it is my view of the world, consulting.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Belle Walker.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Your view. Well, that's perfect. Well, let's start with your background and some shifts you're seeing in your industry, and then we'll dig into your current priorities, challenges, and finally, we'll look ahead where things are going and how you're preparing for what's next. So let's start at the top. What's your role at the company and how does it connect to the bigger vision your team's working towards?
Well, the good news is I'm the founder and CEO, so my role connects pretty tightly with the vision that we're working towards. I mentioned I take organizations from friction to function, a couple keywords in there, organization and friction, which reflect a bit of my background. I come from a long line of engineers. I describe myself as an accidental engineer because I was genuinely out of college before it sank in that I could have studied something other than engineering. So that's where I put all my academic energy, but my passions have always been more on the humanities and around people, the organizations, that connection we all share. So I was spending 40 hours a week or so at the theater in my undergrad days. And as I got out of school and joined the workforce, I really started to see how there were parallels and connections between building organizational structures and teams of people and mechanical structures or combinations of raw materials. So, long and windy path we can get into as much as you want, but the sort of short version is that it's been all about how do you really understand deeply what the problems you're trying to solve are, what the resources you have at hand can be, the constraints you're working under, and how those all come together to create processes and structures that support a business and its people without prioritizing one too heavily over the other.
Well, you took your diversity and you put it into work related because that's how experience is gained. And with experience become knowledge and wisdom. And that's why you're here today. And we're going to jump in now. Now, if I were to shadow you for a day, I'd cast way too big of a shadow, but just say that I shadowed you for a day. What would we see? Or is every day a completely different day?
I would say every day is a completely different day, which is, I think, pretty typical for an entrepreneur who is pursuing many adventures at once. But there are definitely some key themes. When there's client work involved, my work with my clients tends to be a lot of conversations, diving deep into the heart of their businesses, their vision, and what's holding their people together. So I love when the folks I'm working with know where they're trying to go, right? Strategic planning, that vision for other organizations, huge, really important, not my favorite thing. So, in general, I'm working with folks who know where they're going and are not sure how to get there. So, we're really looking to understand what are the stumbling blocks, what are the ladder steps, right? What are the things they have at hand that can help them move forward, or what could get in the way, and how are we going to solve around that? Of course, that's just one piece of it. Running the business has quite a bit of back end work to do. So, any given day, I might be doing some business operations, anything from bookkeeping through, uh, whatever else needs to be attended to. A lot of networking, which is really crucial for not just the business, but my own ongoing learning processes. I actually just came off a call with a bunch of professionals focused around innovation, diving into new and different AI uses, which I know is a hot topic right now, but an important one for all of us to be staying aware of if we're not working in it day to day. And I also am a professional speaker, so working on that sort of intercoupled and yet separate piece of the business to make sure that that message gets out so that more people than I can help directly can hopefully benefit from whatever wisdom I may be hiding somewhere in this brain of mine.
Okay, well, when you step into a business, now I want you to be honest here. When you step into a business, do you try to get as much information from that business and kind of put yourself in their position and what you would do for their business?
Ooh, I would say yes and no. The yes is to the get as much information as I can piece. The no is in terms of putting myself in their business. And the reason I say no is that everyone is different, which is a very, very obvious statement. But how I as myself would address certain challenges or situations may not be authentic to a client that I'm working with. So my favorite example is an organization I worked with once where the org design model that we came up with ended up being what I called the giraffe model because the CEO of that organization came from a very different industry. He came from a banking industry, very command and control culture, and he was now in a fintech business where most of his team were engineers. They were not used to command and control. It was not going well. And so we literally put multiple layers, a single chain reporting from the CEO down into the team, not a ton, but one or two, which I would almost never recommend in a business, especially at that level of seniority. But it was important to have that separation because everyone was aware of this challenge, but nobody was quite ready to change to make it work. So we basically put a gearing mechanism in the middle to help these different operating modes jive and work together. And so, would I be that CEO? I like to think not. Would I generally want a reporting structure like that? Typically, no. Was that what I felt was necessary for this client? Absolutely.
So that sounds incredibly personalized then. That's yeah. When you first said giraffe, I was thinking I envisioned looking from afar, overseeing from afar, way up above everybody else. But not what I expected. Th- The way you did explained it is way better than I got a great picture in my mind after that. That's way better. I appreciate that. So when you look at the numbers, Belle, what metrics or indicators are you tracking most closely right now? What's getting your spotlight?
I the biggest thing that I pay attention to, especially for my clients, is turnover at middle management ranks. And that's one of the biggest signs that my clients are struggling with the structures and the processes because when you have really good clarity of roles, responsibilities, accountability, the middle managers are executing against that vision, working within the system, supporting their teams. When you start to have less clarity, often what happens is your executive leadership kind of pushes down some of that lack of clarity. And yet the folks on the front lines often don't have either the maturity or the desire to engage with that level of uncertainty. And so it all crunches down into your middle managers who then get frustrated and tend to flee. So I look for high turnover in the middle management ranks. The other thing I'm looking at right now is the sort of in the chaos of the current moment, this tendency of a lot of leaders to hunker down and double down on efficiency. So that's the concept that's getting the most of my attention because efficiency is wonderful. It's a key concept for me in the work that I do. And if you take it too far, you lose your resilience. And so I'm definitely keeping an eye out for my clients right now to make sure that they are not getting so narrowly focused on today's efficiency that they lose sight of what's going to happen tomorrow. And boy, is that one where I need to take my own medicine as well and looking at my business to make sure that I don't sacrifice my own resilience for short-term efficiency.
Well, this is going to blend in nicely, this next section here. So, how are those trends and the data points shaping your strategy or nudging you to rethink how you're growing?
Yeah, it's This is definitely a challenging moment for me and for pretty much every other leader I have spoken to. My business is in a very interesting growth moment where we're making the shift from a me to a we, where I do have part-time employees working with my clients, working on my projects, as well as on the operational end of the business. And growing that support is terrifying, right? I think as an empathic human,
Yes.
taking on responsibility for the livelihoods of more people is terrifying. And so, in a land of great uncertainty, I'm having to really sit down and look at the long-term view. What am I trying to build? What am I willing to push through in the short term? What are red flags I need to be aware of so that I don't push foolishly right off a cliff? Uh, I don't know how specifically that's actually answering your question, but that's sort of the thoughts that are swirling in my head at the moment as I look towards the future.
Oh, that sounded way better than if I had to try to explain it, and we probably would have had to edit the profanity. So, what about bringing in new business? How are you attracting leads these days? Are there specific channels or approaches that seem to be hitting the mark for you right now? What's working best for Bell right now?
Yeah, for me, referral networking has been and continues to be my primary source of leads. So, really connecting with professionals who support both businesses and individuals to really be able to share with them the key things to look for. So, like that middle management turnover, the friction to function that I led in with is a shockingly powerful lead generator for me because a lot of organizations don't know exactly what's wrong, especially when it's in that structures and processes piece of their business. When everything is working well, that's what I call invisible infrastructure. You're not focused on how you're doing your work, you're focused on doing the work and doing great work. And so when there's something going wrong, you feel the pain, but don't often know exactly where the issue is. So that friction concept resonates for a lot of people. And so helping my colleagues to see what they can listen for. You get wonderful comments like, I love my executive team. They are so good. I just can't hold them accountable. Tell me more about how that works. How is it that you can have such a high opinion of them and yet struggle with accountability? Often that means you have a more structural mismatch between your expectations and what's actually coming out in your communication. So, referral networking is sort of prime for me, but I would not mind if I was able to get farther ahead on the whatever they're calling SEO for AI these days, helping make sure that all of the automations LLMs see me as a thought leader is something I'm starting to turn my attention to as well, like every other thought leader out there.
Yes. Very much so. It's intriguing though, isn't it? Is it a little scary, or are you up for the challenge?
I would say both. Um,
You look
I
like
have
you seem like a challenge taker though, because of the engineering background. You can't do that. Oh, yes, we can. I can show you.
that's definitely part of it. I would say also, I say both because it is daunting to me to be admitting, right, that I'm interested in being a thought leader in that context, just like everyone else. That's a big pool to swim in. At the same time, I think this is an area where my loquacious nature serves me well.
Oh, I
The
like
fact
that.
that
I like
I
that.
have quite a few long form articles, insights, etc., on my site has actually uh, flown a little bit in the face of historic conventional wisdom, but is doing nicely in this LLM environment. So this is an area where I actually can lean into some of my strengths and have that benefit me versus trying to get a really compelling ad at the top of Google search results. Those 15 words are not my strong suit.
Mm. Well, it's like you mentioned the swimmers, right? Well, what about the floaters along the way? Isn't that a good way to, pick them up on the way through and say, well, I just happen to know that I made this transition and it works. So, look for those floaters. I'm a floater, but
Absolutely.
that's just because of my body density. That would just naturally float. So,
I
just
love
out of
it.
curiosity, these tools that we're talking about, because we mentioned AI tools, are there any tools, tech, or even habits that have made your work easier or more effective lately? What have you been dipping into?
I mean, this is not a new one, but Calendly continues to be one of my most used tools. Being able to set up time, whether it's with a colleague or a client, just by sending a link or pulling up someone else's link, and looking at the calendars in a world where I'm not inside a huge corporation where we all have shared calendars and can look at that
Is
those resources on our
isn't that
own.
confusing sometimes though? When you get in there, well, I have this calendar for this, and then when we go on this group here, we have this. Isn't that confusing?
Yeah, and so being able to just have one link that folks can go to, we can coordinate around, being able to set up a poll when we're trying to coordinate across multiple different people, 5 minutes to set up the poll, and then we can automatically schedule. All of that is has been super helpful for me. I do use ChatGPT with some regularity, particularly for polishing. I
Yeah.
have solid vocabulary as I'm attempting to demonstrate, and yet when you use too many of those words all at once, you can lose some of the message. So having an editor in ChatGPT has been fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just getting into the flow of using that too, and some of the stuff I read, and you can automatically pick like, yeah, okay, that's AI generated. Put that your personal touch on it, polish it a bit, use it as an editing tool, and sometimes I just wow myself. I made a post the other day, and I was like going, and my wife read it, and she's a critique. Yeah, she knows, and she will tell me the God's honest truth, and she said
Perfect.
that looks like a professional copywriter wrote that. And I was like, I know. So I took the compliment and I read it and I was like, yeah, that is pretty good. But it came from me and I just used it to expand and use a few more adjectives and creativity so that there was flow there. Because I'm not a writer by nature. But that's nice that people want to grow and utilize that so that they can basically pinpoint a point they want to make with that individual. Like they want to make one specific point come out, and when that person has that aha moment or that epiphany, that's where you said, okay, this paid off. I like that. So now let's move fast forward here, Belle. I want you to go for it 6 to 12 months. You can pick the in between 6 and 12. What would success look like for you? Because you mentioned about expansion and being responsible for other humans and what are you hoping to celebrate by that time that you pick between the 6 and 12 months?
Well, honestly, on a 6 to 12 month time frame, where a lot of my focus is really is on being able to do more of that public speaking, right? And so I think that there are some really crucial messages that need to be getting out right now. I'll come back to that resilience, efficiency trade-off that I think a lot of organizations are unwittingly stumbling into. This is something that I have seen over and over again as recessions either hit or are predicted, where too many leaders pre-respond and contract too proactively. So my primary goal over the next 6 to 12 months is to get out there and help leaders think from less of a place of terror and more of a place of strength and confidence so that their whole teams can move forward successfully. So success for me would be really having gotten out there, shared that message with more and more people. Part of why I'm so excited about this conversation, helping more leaders at all levels of an organization think about how they are not just being efficient, but resilient over the next 1 to 5 years. That would be success for me. Bonus would be if I had at least one full-time person that I could support through my business in executing on these contracts and supporting my clients. But I'll be pretty happy if I've got at least one organization that is functioning better because we work together.
All right, magic wand time. If you could instantly solve just one major issue in this industry, in these businesses, or even your business, what would you make disappear?
I know that I had time to think about this, and magic wands terrify me because the law of unintended consequences has just come back to bite so many times. So my gut instinct when I think about this is I want more and more leaders to think through the consequences of their decisions on a longer time frame and on a shorter time frame, to be able to balance that need for the future with the need for the present. And yet, so much of what makes many visionary leaders so successful is that complete disconnection from today's reality, that they are only see the far future and that's where they're driving for. So I don't really want to take that away. I want to help them support it. And vice versa, the operators that are down in the weeds often lose track of important details if they go too far up. So maybe more of my magic wand, I would get more of that mind meld, have people communicate more clearly and faster, eliminate some of the communication barriers, because only with all of those different strengths and insights do you actually have a chance of getting where you need to go.
That's a good answer. Of an engineer with a philosophy degree. That's phenomenal. Now, you were speaking before. I'd love to expand on the growth thing, in the way things are unknown right now. I mean, just look at the market. People, when the price of gold goes up, something's going wrong. What
Mhm.
piece of advice could you give to someone about growth in these times of turmoil, if you will?
Yeah, I would say be clear what you're growing towards. And so this is very general advice that I think is applicable in many contexts. Don't go from, go towards. I think that is extra important in a time of uncertainty like this, right? My husband has said repeatedly the only times he's ever regretted taking a job was when he was fleeing the previous job, not going towards a new job.
Best time to look for a job, though, is when you're employed.
Uh, Absolutely. But hopefully you want to find one that you like, not one that's just anything but this. And I think that's a kind of a microscopic level. At a macroscopic level, I think a lot of organizations are growing to grow, right? They're not growing necessarily because they're super clear what they're trying to accomplish, what that vision is. And I'm not talking about the change the world vision. I'm talking about the more nuts and bolts. What does it truly mean to have an executive team when you achieve that vision? What are the roles that you need supporting in that world? That's that's what I'm hoping that more folks will take a step back and think through is, when you're growing, are you truly clear what you're growing towards that will enable your vision to be functional? What will your business look like? What will your teams look like? And grow towards that, not just, I need more people, I need great people, huzzah, let's go. Those are necessary but insufficient for long-term success.
Now, how long have you been doing what you're doing now? I mean, with your business, how many years has this been now?
About 5 years full time. The business was founded in 2012, but I was doing kind of part-time consulting
So it was your
for
side gig. It was your
yeah,
side
for
gig
the
at the
first eight
time.
years or so.
When you decided to jump in, what initiated that? What said, I'm ready for this now, here I go? What was your epiphany moment of said, it's time?
Yeah, I got burned out. I was burned out in the role that I was in, and when I thought through what I was at a large company, 10,000 plus person organization. So I had my main job and then I had a side gig in the company of just talking to other leaders as they were looking at how to structure and evolve their own teams, helping them think through how those structures, those roles, those responsibilities, the accountability, how all of that could come together for their piece of the puzzle to make sense and be successful. And I really liked that. I wasn't burned out on that part. And that's what I'd been saying I wanted this consulting business to do for years. And so that was sort of my moment of, well, my main job, I'm done right now. So I took a sabbatical in 2019 and that was what I wanted to come back to, was really being able to pour all of my time and energy into looking at this invisible infrastructure, these pieces, and allowing more and more leaders to create systems, processes, teams that were going to thrive, not just survive.
So I want the listeners to know now that when you achieve that moment of deciding and you jumped in full and you stepped back, what was the feeling like once you got going? Was it relief? Was it when you,
Honestly, it was terror, it was frustration, it was disappointment. So if you do the math from we're talking in May
oh, yes,
2025.
because you're a numbers person. Absolutely.
Well, and so if we do the math, that means I took a sabbatical in 2019 and got serious about this consulting thing in the beginning of 2020. Something else happened in 2020,
Yeah, I know.
pandemic.
I put it in the
Um,
back of my hard drive there. I bring it up when required.
yeah, and it turns out it takes a lot of sweat and tears at a minimum, hopefully not much blood, but sweat and tears to get a consulting business up and running. I don't know that I would have pushed through if people had been hiring in the summer of 2020. So I'm deeply grateful I pushed through. So there's two. You asked when I got going. That's the question I just answered. When I
Yes,
got
yes.
momentum. Now I'll answer that
Oh,
question. When I
that
got
you're going,
momentum,
going then. Okay. When you got
that
going,
felt
going.
yeah, that felt fantastic. But it took longer than I wanted it to to get there, which I think is also important for listeners to know, right? That just because you decide to pursue something doesn't mean you go from instant decision to success. Sometimes it does take that perseverance, that persistence. And man, that has felt great. The first time I got to really work with, especially with two teams at once that had similar, on paper, they looked so similar. They had similar needs, they had similar team sizes and pain points, but slightly different contexts that changed everything, right? Even the amount of margin that they had, the free cash, the maturity of their teams meant that they needed totally different solutions to really be successful. And that felt great, being able to know that I had helped each of them create something that was right for their business. That was awesome.
Well, this has been a great conversation, Bill. I have to say, I really appreciate how open and thoughtful you've been. Once we finish this series, I'll be pulling together a highlight reel of key takeaways from all our guests, and I'll be sure to send one your way. So
Awesome.
have yourself a wonderful afternoon. Thanks so much for spending this time with me.
Thank you for having me.